My computer told.
All right. And I just have a Zoom is setting up the webinar. So, okay. All right, excellent. Give me 1 second. I'm getting some strange feedback. I'm not sure why.
Oh, it's live, I guess.
Yes. Um, I'm trying to figure out if there's a way for me. Right. Okay. I'm not sure how to stop that for myself, but that's okay. We will get started. Welcome everyone to our very first community classroom with the Space Court Foundation. These events have been set up as a way to, I'm sorry, I keep hearing the things that I said before in my ears, but so this has been set up as a way for interns to present on their own research work at events for us to learn about discrete areas of space law and policy. And so these are going to be hopefully monthly events that we do that provide us a chance to talk about a specific area of space law. And I'm really excited for our very first one, intern Yana Yakushina, who's been with us for a while and has been really just an amazing intern and asset to the organization, will be presenting on some really interesting and exciting research she has done on dark sky issues. So I'm gonna, without further ado, pass it off to Yana to present.
Okay, good morning, good day, everyone. So my name is Yana. I'm an intern of Space Court Foundation. I'm a PhD student at the Ghent University in Belgium. I'm doing my research in law on how we should and why we should recognize light pollution as an environmental problem. And today, first of all, thank you, Space Court Foundation, for providing me with this great opportunity to discuss my work in this great environment. So let's start the discussion about light pollution. Light pollution is a fast-growing environmental problem. It is caused by an increased amount of artificial light at night. There is no one definition yet in law, like international environmental law, for example, and the scientists also didn't agree on the fact which definition is the right one. So for the purposes of this presentation, I chose this definition. Light pollution is in every form of artificial light in the wrong place at the wrong time, which creates a sky glow, glare, and other relevant causes of environmental degradation, including some properties of artificial light which emit non-environmentally friendly or inappropriate light. Why light pollution is a fast-growing problem? Here you can see the light pollution map. Light pollution increasing from 2 to 8% per year. It depends on the region. For example, in the European Union, by the year of 2050, the amount of light pollution would be increased dramatically to 2,500% in the comparison of 2008. Here in the map, you can also see that light pollution is a cross-border problem. For example, the territory of one country can emit the territories of another country, like you can see in Belgium or in Italy or the United Kingdom. It is stated also that mostly in all the territory of Europe and the United States as well, most of the population cannot see the Milky Way, and 99% of the population live in light polluted areas. So what are the consequences of the light pollution and why we should know, especially from the legal perspective? We should know them in order to develop the proper regulations. Light pollution is a concern of many fronts. Dark sky, like astronomy, astronomical activities, environment, and different aspects of the environment, human health, energy, climate change, state budget, public safety, also human rights, and beyond that. But we will not be able to discuss all of it in, in my presentation. So I decided to focus on the four aspects and the consequence of light pollution. It's the beauty of the natural dark sky and astronomical activities, human health, environment, and the public safety. The structure of my presentation, we will discuss the consequence of the light pollution, and I will also give some examples on how governments or international governments respond on these emerged issues. So let's start from the impact of the beauty of the natural dark sky. The first critics of the artificial light at night were definitely astronomers. They started the fight against light pollutions from 1950s. And due to their work, the first dark sky protection laws started to emerge. Light pollution destroyed the natural purity, darkness of the sky, and it created the impossibility to get the scientific data for astronomers, even with the professional equipment. I want to highlight the important role of different organizations which participate in the protection of the dark sky. First of all, it's UNESCO. UNESCO takes a great part in the protection of the dark sky. In 2003, UNESCO created an initiative. It was called Astronomy and the World Heritage. And the reason why this initiative was created is to highlight the role of astronomy in the culture and the history. However, in 2007, UNESCO stated that the dark sky and the celestial objects by themselves cannot be protected under the convention due to the absence of the criteria. However, astronomers find a way how to protect the natural dark sky and to provide the astronomical activities and put everything under protection of the convention. Here you can see 5 sites, 5 objects which were included in the World Heritage List. The last one was included in 2021. All these sites and objects are of the particular importance for the astronomical activities from the cultural, professional, and historical point of view. Another important milestone in the dark sky protection was Starlight Initiative. Starlight Initiative started in 2007, and it was organized also by UNESCO and the partners. At the same year, there was a conference, and the result of this conference was the signing of the Declaration in Defense of the Night Sky and the Right to Starlight, or shortly La Palma Declaration. During this conference, and this declaration specifically proclaimed and highlighted the role of and value of the dark sky for the environment, for the value of life, for the scientific purposes, and for the environment. It states that the parties should provide and include the measures to protect the dark sky into the sustainable development policies, into the environmental policies as well. However, unfortunately, La Palma Declaration doesn't have an obligatory character, so parties don't have to include these measures into the policies. Another important organization which plays a huge role in the dark sky protection is, of course, International Dark Sky Association. It was the first and the biggest association nowadays who deals with the dark sky protection. It has a lot of programs, and the main purpose is to increase the awareness about the light pollution worldwide. They also create dark sky sites. Some sites can get, for example, some cities, as I know in Ireland, for example, they get a special status that they have the most as a dark area. However, the destroyment of the natural beauty is not the only consequences which light pollution has. Another great influence of the artificial light at night is the impacts on the human health. I will not stop and explain why the natural day and night cycle is very important for the human health. Um, but during the last 10 years, the medical research which analyzed the connection between the exposure of the natural light and the influence on the human health increased dramatically. And they show that there is a great connection between and there is a great negative impact on the health and both mental and physical. I will give you some examples. For example, related to physical health, it's sleeping problems like insomnia, hormone-dependent cancer like breast cancer, the risk of obesity, the risk of diabetes. Also, light pollution can contribute to heart diseases, cognitive and affective impairment, premature aging, and so on. Light pollution or increased nighttime lighting can also contribute to etymology of many mental diseases and illnesses like autism, schizophrenia, depression, mood changing, and beyond that. The scientific medical research which evidenced the negative impact of light on the human health didn't go unnoticed within the political agenda as well. And the year of 2012, it was the year which marked the recognition uh, of the fact that the lights at night is a potential risk factor for the human health. Here I gave you two examples of the documents, one which was adopted by the European Union and another one which was adopted by the United States. European Union adopted an opinion on health effects of artificial light by Scientific Committee on Emerging and Newly Identified Health Risks, and the United States adopted the report of the US Council on Scientific and Public Health. The main idea of these two documents was that they just confirmed the fact that artificial light at night can have a high risk. So it made the possibility of the scientific medical research to continue to find how the artificial light at night can influence human health. So also the more proper measures to protect the human health against the nighttime lighting can be developed. The next consequence of the light pollution, and for me personally, it's a personally my interest, is how the light pollution influences the environment. Light pollution is a concern of many fronts of the environment, from the climate change to the strong impact on biodiversity. I will start from the climate change. Light leads to 21 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions per year, which is 6% of global CO2 emissions. Of course, the production of light related to production of energy, and around 35% of energy produced for light is a wasted energy. And this is about $3 billion per year. So how cannot we say that the light pollution is an environmental problem after this? Moreover, which is also important, that during the nighttime, there is a natural cleaning processes of the atmosphere. During this time, with the natural day and night cycle, atmosphere cleaning itself from the emissions, for example, from the CO2 emissions as well. But because at night the atmosphere is lit, these processes are decreasing. So this light pollution can contribute to changing of the levels of the air pollution. The biggest impact, the biggest negative impact of artificial light at night is faced by the biodiversity. A lot of medical research and biological research stated that different species are affected by the artificial light at night. Scientists are convinced that the change of the natural day and night cycle cannot happen without any impact on the living organisms. Here you can see some of the examples of the influence. I will give you some more. Light pollution has a great impact on the sea turtles. During the nesting period, sea turtles go on the coastlines to lay their eggs. But because of the increased amount of illumination on the coastlines, they can disurnate, and it decreases the chances of producing offspring. In 2020, there was a very interesting research related to outbreaks of COVID-19, and scientists trend to believe that the light pollution can contribute to the COVID-19 outbreaks because artificial light at night might have caused a significant amount of selection pressure on the diverse forms of COVS, which are residing in bats. So it can be one of the factors of the COVID-19 outbreaks. These are not the only examples on how light pollution can influence the biodiversity, but we should know for sure that all the species are affected, especially due to the fact that 70% of all the species of the animals are nocturnal. Of course, this situation didn't go unnoticed within the legislation and the regulations. And today I would like to focus on the international environmental law, namely two conventions: the United Nations Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species and the Convention on Biological Diversity. I chose these two conventions because they are major conventions on the protection of the biodiversity. And if these two conventions will recognize light pollution as a hazardous factor for the biodiversity, it can lead to the further development of the legislation against light pollution, especially in relation to legal recognition of light pollution as an environmental problem. So the Convention of Migratory Species of the Wild Animals. The main goal of this convention is to protect the migratory species and their migratory routes. And the parties should identify different hazardous factors which can degrade the habitats or can influence that the animals can go extinct. The convention has two lists. The first list of endangered animals and the second list are the animals which can be included to the list. So the convention has a limited scope of protection. It doesn't protect all the biodiversity. But the light pollution was recognized as a hazardous factor within the framework of this convention. In 2020, there was a 13th conference of the party, and the light pollution was for the first time discussed as a hazardous factor. There were two drafts of regulations presented, one by Australia and another one by the European Union. Both of these drafts, they were related to the different areas, different impacts of the light pollution on the biodiversity. Australian draft was focused on the negative impacts on marine and the coastal species. And Australia offered to adopt the national light pollution guidelines for the wildlife, which already were implemented in Australia. These guidelines increase the awareness about the light pollution and its impacts, and also provide the framework of assessment and the managing of its impacts. The European Union called for awareness of the potential negative effects of artificial light at night on migratory species. It's of course related to the European Union environmental framework. And the European Union also encourages the parties to diminish the amount of artificial light to conserve the night darkness, also for the protection of the wildlife. Both of these drafts were reviewed, discussed, and adopted. Now you can see there is a resolution 13.5, light pollution guidelines for wildlife, and its annex. The 13th conference of the parties also proposed the Secretariat and the Scientific Council of this convention to prepare a new guidelines how to effectively mitigate the light pollution impacts on the migratory species. Work is divided into different stages, and there was recently a meeting, the 5th meeting of the seasonal committee of the Scientific Council, and the first comprehensive work was presented. It was a literature review. You should definitely have a look at this document. It's around 100 pages, and it includes different analysis of the different research on how light pollution and artificial light at night influence different species. This comprehensive literature review would be potentially used for the further development of the guidelines. So to sum up the ongoing information related to this convention, I want to say that it's really significant that the light pollution was recognized as a hazardous factor for the biodiversity within this framework. However, this convention has a limited scope of protection. As I have already mentioned, there's two lists of species, but it's already a great beginning of the legal recognition of light pollution as an environmental problem. The second international convention I want to talk about is the Convention on Biological Diversity of 1992. This convention proclaims that biodiversity conservation is a common concern of humankind, and since then, the identification and reduction of hazardous factors for the biodiversity became a primary matter for the biodiversity law. And here, within this framework, light pollution issues also didn't go unnoticed, but not as much as it was with the Convention on Migratory Species. In November 2019, there was a 14th conference of the parties. And this conference made a decision with regard of the development of post-2020 strategic plan. This made the opportunity to start working on the potential strategic plan on how effectively to protect the biodiversity. So to identify all the hazardous factors and to create targets and goals, which should be achieved after post-2020 years. And during these discussions and reviews of the drafts, stakeholders and scientists would like to include light pollution in the potential targets and goals. So the reduction of the light pollution should be included there. However, at the moment, there was a 0 draft in the first draft, but we cannot see the light pollution goals and targets there yet. So it's still under consideration. And the final decision we will see in May 2022, when the new targets and goals will be adopted. To sum up the framework of the Convention on the Biological Diversity, I would like to note that if the light pollution would be included on the targets and goals of post-2020, it would be the most important step for the protection of biodiversity, because on the contrary from the Convention on Migratory Species, the Convention on Biological Diversity has a broader scope of protection. So it will definitely, and it has, it's more general in relation with the other international environmental convention on protection of biological diversity. So it will influence the development of the environmental regulation related to protection of biodiversity from the light pollution. And finally, I would like to discuss the important question related to the public safety. Because as we all know, the main idea is that increased nighttime illumination in the darker areas on the roads will help to reduce the crime and to reduce the road accidents. But does it always right? From 1960s, since the great spread of lighting on the streets, there was a lot of research related to is it really happening or not? And the research made two main conclusions. But the most important is that artificial illumination at night not always helps and create the safety. It can also help to breed the insecurity. I want to focus on the road and traffic safety and then public safety. Related to the road safety, in the common sense, we all think that the increased illumination on the road help us and make it safe or decrease the amount of collisions. But again, the increased nighttime brightness can blind all the participants on the road, from the drivers to the pedestrians. For example, the driver cannot see the people who will come from the darkness and they accidentally will appear on the road. It also related that nowadays, most of the standards related to the road lighting make an obligation to create the uniformity of light, which also create the higher brightness and the discomfort glare. There was one of the research recently in 2020, and researchers analyzed the amount of change, if the amount of collisions on the roads changed since the new lighting installations were imposed. And they made a conclusion that in general, lighting installations doesn't change the rate of the collisions, but they doesn't make the road safer, but they sometimes can have the opposite effect on it. Also, I want to stop on the lighting standards, especially on the European Union standard 13201, and road lighting is called. And this standard is really demanding. It also requires the uniformity of road lighting, as you can see on the left picture there, so without the dark spots. And this uniformity of light definitely blinds all the participants on the roads, but also uniformity of lighting creates the need to make a very strong and massive lighting infrastructure, which can lead in the worst case scenario in the case of collision, due to there will be no opportunity to go through this lighting installation. So it can increase the amount of mortality. And what about the public safety? The concept here is also more lights, more safer it is. But it's not always true, because most of the research show that there is no influence on the crime rates depending on the change in the amount of lights on the streets. Another conclusion research has made is that it can also increases the crime rates, but decrease the fear of crime. There was in 2020 also there was a research in Australia, and there was a change of lighting installations in the station. And instead of it, of course, decreased the fear of crime, but it increased the crime during the nighttime due to the amount of light. I also put here some information from the research of Chicago Police Department, and it also showed that crime activity levels seem to increase as a result of increased street lighting. So it's not always true. And the main conclusion related to light pollution and the public safety is light can contribute and create the insecurity instead of providing safety for people. Now I will drop to the conclusion of my presentation. Light pollution is a fast-growing environmental problem and a concern of many spheres. It can influence and provide the further and worsen the other form of pollution, as air pollution, for example. It can create the further nature degradation. It can create health problems and have other harmful effects. The mitigation of the light pollution will benefit not only human health and the environment, but also will save the state budget, as we discussed how much energy and money are wasted on the street lighting per year. There is also a strong legal need. There is a strong need on the legal recognition of light pollution as an environmental problem, in order to provide the proper measures to protect the environment and mainly biodiversity. The current regulations, we didn't discuss many of it, but for example, environmental law, it doesn't have any obligatory norm to be implemented or enforced. So none of the countries is going to develop something if there is no obligatory international law. Most of the national laws, which I didn't discuss here due to not a lot of time, but they also exist, they're mostly focused on the energy efficiency. Like, for example, the European Union standard on road lighting, it's mostly focused on the energy efficiency, but not on the environmental aspects of the light pollution. But we already can witness the gradual steps to the legal recognition of light pollution as a hazardous environmental factor for the environment. And this is really significant, especially within the framework of international environmental conventions. Thank you for your attention. It was great to give such a brief overview about the light pollution issues. Here you can find my contact information if you'd like to work on certain projects or just add me somewhere to ask any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Yana, for sharing this presentation with us today, and again for kicking off our community classroom. I want to open it up to give folks a chance to ask any questions or raise any discussion points, maybe something that really struck you that was interesting that you learned in the presentation, or something you wanted to find more out about. So I think what probably the best way to deal with questions at this point is to put them in the chat. And I'm going to make sure that folks can do that. All right. Let me know if you all are able to access the chat to place a question. One interesting point of discussion that I was thinking about when learning about this is just, how our view of space and our understanding of it can change when we don't actually have access to see it, right? A lot of us are thinking about things in terms of space. And I know growing up in a very remote area, being able to look up at the sky, see the Milky Way, see the constellations, and have that kind of be a part of my experience with the world and with the universe was like very crucial to my understanding of just being a person in this universe. And my kids don't really get to experience that living in a city with the amount of light pollution that we have. We're lucky if we can see a few stars or a bright planet every now and then. And I try to get them out into areas where they have that chance to kind of see the sky. But I think even just from that standpoint, all of the health aspects you discussed were really, really interesting and compelling. But I was thinking even just, that small thing of just being able to interact with and see our sky can have, not being able to do that can actually have a big impact. I don't know if that's something that you saw in your research or were thinking about as well. But if you want to discuss that a little bit or respond.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there is a lot of research related to the ethical perspective. Because if you see the development of the art, for example, like the paintings, you can see how many creators were drawing the beauty of the dark sky. It was the inspiration for people for poetry as well. And now people just cannot see it. So it's also created certain problems related to the cultural development and the ethics also. But yeah, and just people can basically cannot see anything what is going on above, except that the astronomers cannot do anything related to their professional activities, especially the amateur astronomers who cannot have the extra professional equipment. So yeah, I really think that it's an issue even related to our daily life. Nobody is putting our heads above because you cannot see anything. Yeah, because of the sky glow there, it just you cannot reach through it. It just reflected back, and yeah, the amount of light we have, and then the screens from the phones also. We're just surrounded by lights from everywhere, so we're stuck in a certain thing and don't see the nature at all. Just nature. I mean, just forest, even, not the outer space, but just what's going on around us.
I'm not seeing any more questions coming in right now. So I think what I will go ahead and do is end the live session. If there are, unless there were some other points that you wanted to touch on before we did that, Yana.
I don't know if somebody or you, Julia, want to discuss. I put two questions, like two topics for the discussions. One related to how we should recognize legally light pollution as an environmental problem, and the second one, light pollution in the space activities. So yeah, just let me know.
Actually, yeah, I think that would be great to look at those. We did have a question come in from Joey first.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you can see it, he's saying he remembers seeing proposals about bioluminescent algae, I'm not pronouncing it right, as alternative to lights. Have you seen anything about that? That is a great question, and that would be amazing.
Yeah, but there is a lot of things going on related to specific which lighting bulbs we should use, because it was proven already that the LED, which is used everywhere, it emits blue spectrum light or white spectrum light, which is actually really harmful for the environment and the human health. So now they're developing a lot of alternatives, and I never heard about the one which Joey has mentioned, but I know that there is a good alternative, for example, for the protective areas to use the red lights, because it's not harmful for animals, especially doesn't attract, it just doesn't attract any species. Well, maybe some of them. I'm not really a biologist, but it's better than the white LEDs, which can be used, for example, in the national parks. But yeah, it's a really good point, because there's so many different lightings. But why LED is used, it's again related to the lighting standards, mostly across the globe. It's just related to the energy efficiency. Like LED is the most energy efficient. But the previous lighting, which was used like, I don't know, 20 years ago, which is not that energy efficient, but it's more environmentally friendly. So we have to find the balance for the more environmentally friendly lights, and which will be at the same time energy efficient. So not to be focused only on energy efficiency. But yeah, this is my answer. I don't know if I really answered the question.
Great. And it looks like we have a question from Jonathan.
Hey, Yana, just a sort of an aside, but there's a line of cases in the US about light trespass. Your photons are landing on my property, et cetera, which probably is about the thinnest cause of trespass you can imagine, but sound and light as sort of trespass causes of action that some of the reasoning is actually quite novel and interesting. And I think it might apply to the more of the sort of public harm of
neighbor law.
You're right. Lots of avenues to pursue, lots of ways to get at this problem, I suspect. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, but thanks for your comment, because trespass, lighting trespass is also recognized as well, it's illegal also in Great Britain, I think. They also have certain ordinances and laws related to diminishing the amount of lighting trespasses from one windows to each, or one property to another property. But with the lighting trespasses and the light pollution regulations in general, it's very sad that it's only can be applied for the private property, but it's not related to public property. And the public property most of the time create the lighting trespasses and create the light pollution. This is like the funny thing about it, because it's excluded from there, because it's a public place, and for example, for the security reasons. So it's also, the balance should be found there.
Yeah, I have to tie it maybe to some public harm or some.
Yeah, but I showed the pictures from the street, it's like too much light. It's like you can see there's like a small city, like a small place, and this white light there, it's like just not necessarily needed even.
It's crazy.
Or why not to create the public light which can be turned on and off automatically while people will pass? They made some type of these projects, as I know in Belgium, for example, they made an experiment with cyclists. Like when you pass, the lights are on, and then you are gone, they turning off like gradually. Yeah. It's also quite interesting. There is a little bit of lights in the street, but when you pass, they turn more. Okay, if it's create the, because darkness create the fear of crime. It's like our program, I think we have.
Okay. Do you want to go to your discussion points then? It doesn't look like we have any more questions right now.
Okay. So my discussion points, I don't know where you want to start. We can just discuss a little bit of how we should recognize light pollution as an environmental problem, which should be the legal framework. Especially I'm interested in the international law. Should we use the international environmental law principles, and will the creation, for example, we need to create the international agreement against light pollution. I don't know. And this will create a harmonization of the legislation on the dark sky protection across the countries. Just wondering, what is your opinion about these things? Somebody wants to say something?
Hi, my name is Pratyusha, and I wanted to talk to you not about this question, but just wanted your opinion on a proposition that China had. So China planned to launch its own artificial moon, which is supposed to be 8 times brighter than the moon that we have today. And the reason that they gave us was that they wanted to replace all the street lamps and etc. in the urban areas, and this would lower the electricity costs in urban areas, etc. So, how efficient do you think this could be?
Can you repeat the question, because I heard a lot of echo, please?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, you can repeat. I think I can hear you.
Yeah. So my question was that recently China, came up with a plan to launch its own artificial moon, which is supposed to be 8 times brighter than the moon that we have today.
Oh yeah.
Right now, like the natural moon. The reason that the state gave was that they wanted to replace all the street lamps to reduce electricity costs and also the light pollution. So, how efficient do you think this is?
I'm just wondering.
And really speaking,
yeah. Sorry, I'm just wondering how this should decrease the electricity costs. How this moon should operate. They didn't explain it.
No, so this will be put up, I'm assuming, and they'll remove all the streetlights that exist. So it is going to act as a moon for the city.
Yeah,
and this is going to be really bright. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just where they gonna place it, in the outer space or above the city itself instead of all the lights? They're gonna put it in the outer space or in the earth, like in the sky somewhere.
Yeah, the idea
So
was to be
they,
in the orbit.
they want to launch a satellite as an
Oh, yeah.
experiment. Yeah.
Okay, so
So
how this can be made related to the legal perspective, and if it's good decision to make. I don't know if this artificial moon will create more light because it's still not there and we cannot tell, because there is already one moon which was like 100 years ago enough for people to operate at night, which was enough light. But it may definitely decrease the light pollution probably. If they will switch off all the lights and just put the artificial moon, then it makes sense that it's basically will decrease the amount of light pollution. But on the other hand, because another subject I'm going to discuss later is about the satellites and how they also create the light pollution. So won't this moon also contribute to the light pollution? It's also a big question. So we cannot really say.
yes, that does make sense. I just wanted to get your opinion on with regards
Okay.
to that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yana, it's Jonathan. To tie it back to your question, I think a lot of the public environmental law, international environmental law is around cross-border harm, right? There has to be some sort of international transboundary harm. The China fake moon probably better than anything in light pollution would seem to trigger in a kind of potential for cross-boundary harm to other countries with an artificial satellite that is essentially, I think the idea is to have it so that it would never be dark.
Yeah, I'm also not getting it, like the point, because the main point, there were a lot of experiments when one of the city, they just turn off like 60% of light and people even not know, like, because it's still the same amount of light, but they turn on literally 60% of light.
Yeah.
So it will save the energy, save the budget, and the rest, like, decrease the light pollution consequences. But why nobody is doing it still? I'm really concerned about it. And this is really interesting question about the cross-bordering nature, which can be created by the artificial moon. Because how are they going to place it directly to China or directly to the certain city?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have to, it's weird because it can't be as far out as the geostationary orbit. I think to be effective for light, it has to be in Leo. So it can't, I don't know, it's kind of a mess. And I think Joey pointing out the parallels with the Death Star are accurate, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it's even possible to lead yeah. And who will turn it on and off? Like, this is a very interesting question. How it's going to operate? I don't know.
Darth Vader, I believe. So.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at the chat. I don't know. Do you have any comments about the environmental regulations in the sphere, or we can just switch to the space activities, actually? Because the interesting thing for me related to the international environmental principles is the precautionary principle.
Yeah.
Like the lack of scientific certainty shouldn't be, well, even though there's quite a broad scientific certainty that light pollution has a certain impact, this scientific uncertainty shouldn't not allow us to create the regulations against light pollution. This is one of the main factors.
But there are good
really
examples.
Don't understand why we always wait till the moment why there is no way back. Like, it's always related to environmental problems. Like, it can be done now before it's like getting worse. No, nobody's doing it.
But I mean, there are at least a couple of examples like acid rain and the ozone and even the Paris Accord specifically says that the science is not necessarily settled, but that is no reason for us not to have this treaty and move forward. So hopefully, you know, you leverage some of those good examples where we've worked together on a problem that we know is a problem. We just don't know this necessarily, can't quantify it or whatever.
Yeah, I guess. I just hope it can be settled something.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there is a really great International Dark Sky Association with its initiatives related to creating the dark sky sites, dark sky parks. It's quite beautiful. It's also relaxing for tourism. Like, do you know, like it's 2021 and people going out from the cities to these dark sky parks, out from the light. You can see the trend that people are leaving the cities. Why not turn off the lights even from this perspective?
I have to turn off my cat. Sorry.
As a mayor of the city, I'm thinking as a mayor of the city.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that the dark sky sites begin to have enough clout to have a private cause of action for preservation of their dark skies in the name of, you know, economic harm or loss of tourism if we lose the dark sky.
Useful marketing also.
Yeah.
Always marketing. Okay, let's, I don't know, somebody has any comments related to environmental law, or I'm just switching to the space activities directly, because it's also interesting.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The only other thing I was thinking of as you were just talking is that the great thing about, you know, rural areas being able to kind of get this economic benefit of tourism through being a dark sky designated location is that a lot of times, you know, in order to bolster an economy, an area might need to industrialize or you know, do things that might actually harm the environment. Where I'm from, it was, you know, mining for a very long time, which can have a negative effect. And so being able to say, you know, here's a way for us to get, you know, to get bolster our economy by being a tourist location, just by the fact that we have a beautiful dark sky that people can look at and want to look at. It's a way of kind of allowing those communities to have that economic benefit without actually having to cause environmental harm to their own community. So I think it's a really cool concept, and yeah, I hope that continues.
Yeah, but the problem with the dark sky parks, they sometimes connect it with the protection areas, and they put the lights around these protection areas. So the animals, for example, who live in the darkened areas, they cannot go out because of the lights surrounded by it. So it's also a problem with the light pollution outside of these dark areas.
All right, well, since we have about 5 minutes left, if you want to talk a little bit about this point number 2, and then we can close it out.
Yeah, so the connection between light pollution and the space activities, we already started the discussion related to the satellites. And I saw and I read a lot of research related to the fact that the satellites contribute to the light pollution, which at least like 10%. And the more satellites are put in the orbit, the more light pollution is increasing in the Earth. So it's also a problem from even in the outer space, which increasing the light pollution. How these can be stopped, also a problem. Because if people, for people, it doesn't matter if light pollution exists on the Earth, so they will never care about the light pollution caused from the outer space. Also, if it's related to the astronomical activities, because it's still existing even in the professional astronomical activities, with the use of the professional equipment, sometimes they just see the lines, like the track of the satellites in between the stars, like the airplanes we see when we are on the Earth, but they see it in the outer space. So it's also decreasing the chances to get the right scientific data.
Right. I don't see any more new hands up or questions in the chat. Um, if anyone has something they would like to add or ask about with regard to how satellites and space activities affect light pollution, I think now would be the time to do it. We just have a couple of minutes left. But I think that the discussion Pratusha brought up about the artificial moon was really, really a great example of how that can be, how that has an effect.
I think we don't have any comments left, or I don't see any of them. And I cannot comment it as well, because this is a subject which I'm not really familiar with, and I'm trying to manage it for the environment and the space activities. Yeah, it's also part of the contribution, of course, but we should start from the streets next to our houses, I guess, and the houses next door. As Jonathan mentioned, the lighting trespasses.
Well, thank you so much, Yana, again for being our first presenter for our Space Court community classrooms. I just want to encourage everyone to think about, participating this way. This is a great chance for folks to highlight the research that they're doing, any specific areas that are related to space law and policy that you want to highlight or present on. This is a great opportunity to do it. So thank you, Yana, for just doing such an amazing job of kicking off this new forum that we're starting. And thank you to everyone who joined.
Thank you for the great opportunity, and thank you everybody who listened to my small presentation. I was happy to answer your questions as well. And I hope we will go through the protection of the dark sky and decrease the amount of light pollution from the legal perspective.